2.
Hello and welcome back to Speak. This is a very special episode because this episode we are going to be talking all things menopause. And I suppose similar to a lot of recent episodes, this has come off the back of a voice note exchange between myself and Crystal where it came up about menopause. And where she was like, what the fuck? I don't know anything. I need to learn. And I was like, I don't know anything. I don't want to fucking know any more about it. I'm just going to stay head in the sand.
Ignorant. Nice and ignorant, yeah.
Nice and ignorant and just hope it doesn't come around. But anyway, so we decided what better thing to do than to invite two people who can educate us and tell us a bit about lived experience and I suppose light at the end of the tunnel and all of that jazz. So delighted to welcome Heather Beach and Sarah Wiltshire, and we are going to get into the conversation. So ladies, I'll hand over to you. Heather, if you want to give yourself an intro first, and then Sarah, and then we'll get into it.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm on the famous podcast with Crystal and Elise. Like, I mean, it's aspirational, this is. Thank you. And what's so funny is Crystal asking me to speak on something which I'm not actually an expert on at all. There's plenty of things I am an expert on, but this isn't one of them, which is why I asked Sarah to come along too, because she is an expert. But I can speak from the lived experience. But what I am an expert on, for anybody who's interested, is I run a business called Healthy Work Company, and I support organisations with their wellbeing strategy from a kind of stress risk assessment perspective onwards. And I also do training starting with the senior team, middle managers, and then we do sort of first aid for mental health. We do sort of, I sort of write stuff for people if I feel I have the expertise, and if I don't, I call in specialists. Hence why when I started to see there was a real interest in the menopause, I got in touch with Sarah because she'd started a Facebook group, and we then started working together, and Sarah does our menopause training for us where customers want it. And we've done a lot in male-dominated workforces, which is really nice, where they've wanted the guys to understand what their partners are going through, what their colleagues are going through, etc. So it's really, really nice to see that trend happening in organisations now.
Yeah.
So there you go. Oh, I'm also a mum. I've got a 17-year-old in the next room playing on her PS4.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I'm Sarah Wiltshire. I'm a transformational coach, and I specialise in midlife and menopause. And basically came about because I was in corporate for 30 years. I had quite a big girl's job in corporate as a supply chain manager, production manager in procurement. And I had a dreadful menopause. And at the time that I was going through my dreadful menopause, I was made redundant twice in 2 years. And it was really, really painful and kind of lost my mojo a little bit. So I went into coaching because it's something I'd always done at work anyway. I'd always been a coach and a mentor, and I really loved that. Of my age and my experience, and the fact that I was, I had teenage kids, so I was coming up to that empty nest time of life as well. My parents were elderly and sort of getting very old and frail. People naturally migrated for them were actually menopause related, and it was only when I became more educated about menopause I was like joining the dots, going, do you know what, we just don't know enough about this at all. And it made me think I really struggled because of my ignorance, and it struck a light in me to say, if I suffered in the way I did just because I was ignorant to it, then other people are doing the same. So yeah, so this conversation I had with my coaching cohorts, we were talking about the not knowing enough about it. I walked past the Men at Work sign and I read it as menopause at work, and that's basically where this thing came from. So I started a Facebook group called Caution Menopause at Work, and it just became a little bit of a hub. It was immediately, immediate friends really who were all going through similar things, and they invited their friends, and various people invited more, and it's grown into a lovely little nest of people who we've just got this little support group going on. Nice. And I put facts in there about menopause, and I put on little chats of my own, little interviews with people who work with menopause as well in some way, like hypnotherapists and kinesiologists and everything. So it's just become a support network. And from that, Heather found me and she said, I don't know how I've come across this page, but I really like what you're doing, and it's exactly what I'm looking for. Would you like to collaborate? And I said, oh my goodness, I don't do this yet, I'm not quite ready. And she went, oh darling, you'll never be ready, should we do it anyway?
That's so Heather as well.
There
You'll never be ready.
And it was the best thing that ever happened, really, because it made me really step my game up, and it made me really, really learn about this subject. And some of the stories I listen to are absolutely heartbreaking, and some of them are really motivating. So we do get a bit of a balance in this, so it isn't all doom and gloom, it isn't all positive, but actually the more people know about it, I think, is where the real magic is, because it takes that fear away. Because from my story, there was horrible times where I thought I had onset dementia. And I thought I had some sort of endometrial cancer, because my body was just rejecting things, and I was frightened. And so I made it my mission to get educated, and that's what I do.
Amazing. I think, and we're naturally, I think, already flowing into the conversation around this. And I think since we said we were going to have this call, and me and Elisa sort of joked about, it's lovely to remain blissfully ignorant, but I think I'm 40 next year, and it's very, very in my consciousness actually that this change is going to happen, and I've started to be just a little bit more aware of some of the information out there. And I watched a snippet of a podcast, Diary of a CEO. I love the podcast, and there's a lady on there specifically talking about just basically like female health, and she quoted a statistic to me that I thought was, well, a connection. She put something together that I thought, oh God. And she was talking about just how difficult menopause is for women. And she said, for example, pretty much everybody is going through menopause between 45 and 55. And did you know this is the most likely time for a woman to commit suicide?
Yeah.
Oh,
and that's It's the most prominent age group for a woman, for females to commit suicide. It's also the highest divorce rate between 45 and 55, which actually has a lot of that factor in there as well, of that sort of transition, a massive transition for us in our bodies, in our minds, but actually in our lives as well, in so many ways. So it can be a completely debilitating time for some people, and that just not knowing what's going on, doubting everything. And we kind of reject things when we don't understand. We reject what's normally our support network as well, and that's when we need them the most. So sometimes by just opening up conversation in a group of strangers is actually a really positive thing for lots of women, because they don't have any history with them, so they'll talk about everything. And that's a really nice thing.
Safe space. And I think this is one of the amazing voice notes that I shared with Heather had shared with.
What a shame.
You're on mute again.
Sorry guys, that's just it's automatically carried on recording, so
you'll just edit that bit out.
Just well, for the audience, just having a few Wi-Fi issues, so sorry guys. But to pick up where I left off, one of the voice note exchanges that I'd had with Heather was you obviously sharing with me, Heather, kind of how it has been for you. And I was like, people need to understand what it is. So I don't know if you feel, if you want to take us through your journey.
I think what Sarah said earlier is really pertinent, in that I think one of the challenges inherent in this is that as a woman in your 50s, you're going through so many life changes. You've got so much going on that it's very, very difficult to actually apportion what's menopause and what's just life. And so mine was, I suppose, pretty typical. And when I look at I'm sorry to say, ladies, 80% of my friends were all now going through the same things. I'm out the other side. Mine was pretty short in terms of the fact that your parents are elderly or dying, and they die. You've got teenage children who are presenting you with teenage children problems.
Yeah.
And all of that happens at the same time as you're going through the menopause. So I've literally got every female friend leaving me voice messages all the time. Like, I've got my mum to cope with. I don't even really like my mum that much, but I'm stuck with her. I've got to look after her.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep a job going. It's a really, really intense job. And I've got this teenage child that's going through whatever they're going through. And you are literally at the hub of so much in that period. And you know there's life the other side. Like, I feel now that I'm coming out the other side, and I feel mine was really intense period because my mum died, and then a year later my dad died. And during that period, my daughter got diagnosed with severe obsessive compulsive disorder. So I had like 18 months of utter hell,
Yeah.
and then probably a year to recover after that. But now I can see light at the end of the tunnel. I can see, well, my daughter's probably going to go to equine college next year. She's recovering. I can maybe think about my life completely differently. You know, I'm thinking about maybe traveling. I'm thinking about seeing if people want some mental health training overseas so that I can, you know, travel and Airbnb my house out. And I feel like I'm an HRT surprisingly made an enormous difference, because I was convinced everything I was going through was a life issue, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely was a life issue. And then I can't remember, a number of people, a friend of mine, Siobhan, who coaches midlife, Sarah, a number of people said, look, have you thought about going to the GP? And I'm like, it's just life. You know, and the people that told me I needed antidepressants when I was grieving for my mum and dad, please, no. It's grief. It's normal. We all fall apart from time to time. We
You
don't
don't
need
have to neutralize
antidepressants.
it.
Exactly. But with this, I was like, oh, all right then. And the GP made it really hard, really hard. I got sent from pillar to post. I gave up for months, and then finally I was in floods of tears, overwhelmed. This was back, I think, last October. I was absolutely the end of my rope. And I was like, right, I'm going to sort this. And I rang the hospital, and I spoke to a lovely nurse, and she was like, right, this is what you need to do. And literally within 2 weeks of having a little bit of HRT, I was like, oh, I can sleep again. It isn't all, but I said when I spoke to the doctor on the phone, I said, how will I know that I'm better? Because I've got all these life issues going on. So how will I know the HRT is working? And she said, to be quite honest, the only symptom which is unique to the menopause, which you won't be getting through all your other life issues, is sweats, is hot flushes. She said everything else, the sleeping, yeah, it could be the menopause. It could be because you're having a rubbish time. It could be a number, you know, all the symptoms, aches, pains, could be menopause, could be, you know, because you're sitting still all day. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to be able to disentangle. But the HRT did make an enormous difference. So when I finally got it, so
I think that was one of the things that took me really by surprise, is actually hearing that this sort of 45 to 55 window tends to collide with, you've got like adolescent children. If you've got children, your parents typically are older, you've got major responsibilities in terms of for other people at this point, and nothing stops.
no.
So it's like you're having a terrible time. It could be 18 months, could be 2 years. Like, your body doesn't care.
Or
Your
longer
body is
for
just
many
doing,
women.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I found that home truth for me was like, oh God, the world's not going to stop and hug me until I'm out of menopause.
And in our parents' generation, those women were not at work. And that's the
main
difference. We are trying to work and hold down careers which by the time we're in our 40s and 50s are quite senior, or quite and you've got all this other stuff going on. So
do you think
we call it the sandwich generation for that reason.
We do.
You know, we are sandwiched in between young kids, if we have them, and you know, or teenage kids, and then the elderly parents. My story is really similar to Heather. When we first met, we couldn't believe the similarities, because I lost both my parents within 9 months of each other as well. And it had been a really painful, 4 years of just waiting for this to happen, and then suddenly it came crashing in. And so I was dealing with all that. I was then dealing with we had COVID going on, which everybody was dealing with, you know, kids going, my daughter leaving for university. It was just, there was such a lot going on at that time that I was the last person to give myself any care and attention, really. And because we just don't, as you say, we carry on going. And you know, when my father-in-law found out I was going to leave my job behind to do this as a career, he was like, "Well, I don't think there's any fuss about menopause. We didn't struggle with the menopause, did we, Jen?" And I said to his wife, and I said, "Really, Jen? Then when did your period stop then?" And he was like, "Oh," you know, because he couldn't handle the fact that I'd actually said the word period to my father-in-law.
How dare you say the word period?
But it was just like his assumption was, we don't need to talk about it because my wife didn't struggle. And when I talked to her in private, she said, I actually did have quite a hard time, but we just got on with it because nobody would ever talk about it. And that's what we want to change. We want to change that stigma of being able to talk about it so that people feel as if they're supported. You're absolutely right here that a lot of it is midlife transitions of all these things going on, and they're chaotic. But when you're losing sleep night after night after night because you're waking up in a hot sweat, you just don't cope the same the next day with any of the symptoms, you know, because you're deprived of that fundamental thing, which actually sleep is the most important thing for us. You know, if we don't get a decent sleep, everything else is exacerbated. So, you know, that I think you know, the night sweats for me were one of the worst symptoms. They'd wake me up with heart palpitations, and then my brain would automatically go into overdrive, worrying about all the things that were going on in my life. And that was where, you know, you're then awake for you know, 3 hours in the middle of the night after night. And it's hard.
I think it's one of the things that might be really important to like the male listeners is it was very said in a small part there, but the reason this is a big deal now is because women are at work. And we weren't.
No.
We weren't at work. We were at home having hot sweats while our partners were at work, or you know, it was in the privacy of our own home. That was our job. Our job was to maintain the home, and so it was very, very hidden. Whereas now,
so 80% of menopausal women are in the workplace, and you know, between the age of 45 and 64, that demographic is the fastest growing demographic in the workplace. So more people are going into work, even though they may not have worked before. So, and there's a lot of social factors to that as well. You know, we talked earlier about divorce rates being at their highest between 45 and 55. Well, that's actually thrown more women back into the workplace if they're suddenly, you know, one wage down as a family. And so there's reasons why they're going into it. We've also got bigger lifestyles that we want to maintain, and you know, we want to keep that going. We want that independence as well. So we're working through a time that we didn't do before. Our mums didn't do that, and if they needed a nap in the afternoon, there's nobody around there to tell them they couldn't. Whereas it's pretty tough when you're in an office in a 9-to-5 job, you know, just to catch up.
So there must be a correlation then as well between this and not having more women in senior leadership positions, because obviously you get to that stage of your career and how many people then are bowing out of the workplace because it's just so fucking hard to do this through menopause.
So 1 in 4 women are looking for a demotion, or they won't take that promotion that they've actually really earned their stripes to take on. You know, you get to about 45 and you've you know, your kids are a little bit older, or you know, you've got that seniority, you've got all that experience, offered a promotion. This is what happened to me, and I was, you know, it was fine for so many years, but then I suddenly got to 45, 46, and it was starting to crumble. Couldn't do that, didn't have the confidence. The panic attacks were insane, and you know, for the job that I've been doing for so long, I just lost the confidence to do it. And that's 1 in 4 women are actually trying to pull away from that job. But 1 in 10 are leaving work, and they tend to be in senior roles. So if we don't do something about this to support women in the workplace, we will continue to be dominated by male C-suite organisations. You know,
and lads, that can't happen. I won't fucking stand for it.
There are more CEOs. There are more CEOs in the country by the name of Dave than there are female CEOs, and that has to change. You know, and we've got to keep these women there. So
I have a question, because from things both of you have said, I I'm like, I don't even know the actual full list of symptoms.
I was just gonna, yeah, for sure.
I was like, you're talking heart palpitations, panic attacks. I knew the sweats, I knew the sleep thing.
Let me get my scroll out.
You said aches and pains. Now I'm like, tell me what.
What
Well,
could
what is
we
it?
expect, and what should people then empathize with women when they're going through this? So yeah, give it to us.
Give it
Give it
to
us
you.
straight.
Well, there are around about 60 recognised symptoms of menopause, but there are
60?
34 common. 60, yeah.
Okay.
But again, this is subject to, you know, we could put everything down to menopause, and there's going to be a certain element that's going to be aging, and we're getting older. The key ones are hot sweats and night sweats. So not everybody will have hot sweats during the day, but a lot of women have night sweats. And these are quite scary because they tend to come hand in hand with heart palpitations as well. So you wake from a completely sedentary state with your heart racing at your body. And I know women who've had to take bedding and new bed clothes to work to bed with them every single night because they literally have to strip the bed and make it again because it's drenched. So it's severe, you know, and it's disruptive. So that's, you know, two of the main things. But anxiety on the back of that, because hot sweats, if you have them during the day, are really, really noticeable to other people. And that can increase the anxiety about it, especially if you're in a job where you have to stand in front of people, or you have to remember the names of people, you know, brain fog and memory loss. Massive issue at this time of, because our estrogen receptors are all over our body. And when we start to lose estrogen, that's when it affects our cognitive function and our joints and our muscles and everything. So there's lots of those things going on. That really does bring on the anxiety, which then brings on the panic. We lose that self-worth. So we lose that confidence, which means that there's a bit of sadness and depression in a way that it's not necessarily clinical depression. It's just there's a sadness. I think I tend to coach people through it like a grief, really, because a lot of people grieve this loss of their youth and a loss of their reproductive years and just that they feel old. And because we've always talked about menopause as being an old woman's thing, which it isn't, by the way, it's not something you're going to look forward to, because it's almost like you don't walk into your office and go, by the way, kids, I'm old now, so can you just be gentle with me? You know, you'd never do that. So it's this realization that, you know, how we can cope with it to get out the other side. So yeah, there are 34 common symptoms. I'm more than happy to share that on a link for you to share with your listeners as well. And you know, symptoms trackers are really good for this. Just to, as Heather was saying, she found it really difficult for her doctor to take her seriously, or to a doctor to listen. So I always recommend that people take in a symptoms checker, and they just note when things are happening and what kind of symptoms they're experiencing. If it is a cognitive issue, if it's a mental issue, or if it's a physical issue. So we get joint pains, we get our muscles start to deteriorate, and so we find things heavy lifting quite difficult. Got lots of headaches and migraines, and this is, you know, these are things that we probably had experienced in our life anyway, but they may come more suddenly during this time.
The worst thing for me was the brain fog.
I was actually going to say the brain fog's the one that stresses me out.
Yeah, and that can come very early, can't it? And you're kind of, again, you don't know. You think, well, so for me, it was like, well, hang on, I've got all this stuff that's going on. I'm absolutely overwhelmed. I've got a list of all these jobs to do for my mum, my dad, my daughter, my work, my this, my that, my health, my home admin, all this stuff. I was completely overwhelmed, and my head just couldn't process it in the same way. No. And I'm really sharp and really quick normally. I'm like bang, bang, bang. And I was just, I really, that was the worst for me. And that was, again, the thing which HRT, within a couple of weeks, I was back cooking on gas.
Yeah,
exactly. My brain was back.
It's incredible. I think that's where, you know, for somebody in your position and my position as well, where you're talking in front of people all the time, when you lose the word, it's so embarrassing. And, you know, you can't remember or the train of thought. You can't even remember why you were talking sometimes. Never mind what the next word is.
Wasn't that bad. It was more about having too much on and being overwhelmed with it all, and finding that I couldn't prioritize. So that sort of thing for me. I never lose my words, Sarah.
Oh, do you not? Oh,
No.
goodness me. I
Come
just
on,
make them up.
Sarah.
Is that a
As if-
question?
I now start my presentations with, this could go anywhere, by the way, because I am menopausal, and I could either have a heart palpitation that stops me in my tracks and turns me into a robot, or I could actually forget what I'm talking about. So we'll pass. It then gives everybody else in the room that reassurance that they're not alone in doing this either. You've got to normalize this. And some of the senior women that I've worked with say that that's the worst thing that they find is when they either lose track or they've forgotten a word that's so important in their presentation, because they then get embarrassed that if they are in a male dominated environment, then it just highlights that thing again. I also get a lot of men saying to me, by the way, I've ticked off all of those symptoms on your symptoms tracker. It's like, yeah, okay, it's not a competition, guys, but it just proves that there are a lot of it which is age related. And but I think where the symptoms become quite scary are because these can happen in our early 40s. They can start to happen in our early 40s. And if you don't know that they are in the post, then you do start to think that something is seriously wrong.
I like that phrase, in the post. I'm like, I'm not accepting mail right now. Thank you.
Nailing
I'm not
post
signing
box
for
shut.
it.
Nailing it shut. So what then is the perimenopause? Because I hear that word bandied about, but I don't know what it is.
So the perimenopause is the lead up to menopause. Menopause is actually a 24-hour thing. So your menopause is the 12-month anniversary of your last period. So it's the day after your 12-month anniversary. And then you've got your menopausal for a day. And then, so you can get the bunting out and put it all up and pop the corks. And then after that, you're postmenopausal. So your perimenopausal are the most symptomatic years. And they can start usually in our sort of mid 40s, where you notice a difference. Your menstrual cycle might change a little bit. So the reason why, it is the coming to the end of the periods. That's why we call it the menopause. And you think that your menstrual cycle would start to slow down and calm down and your periods get lighter, but it's actually quite often for many of us it's totally the opposite.
I'm afraid. Yeah.
Oh, what?
And unfortunately and this is one of the worst sort of embarrassing symptoms, because you can get excessively heavy periods, and they call it flooding, which does what it says on the tin. Sorry about that, but you need to know about it. But because our progesterone and our estrogen are starting to decline, we go out of cycle. So I've got a really good graph actually that I show the sort of hormonal sort of cycle through our lives from pubescent to postmenopause. And you can see the carnage that happens in puberty. And we all recognize that. We all recognize when our hormones are coming in, that there's going to be some erratic feelings and behaviors, and just, getting used to these hormones going around our body, and bodies developing, because our estrogen, develops our female curves and our shape. And then at the other side of what is usually a very nice, cycle, it goes into absolute batshit crazy territory, where it is all over the place again, because our progesterone may skip and our eggs might skip a month, and then suddenly get a heavy flood. And it's one of the ones that I was so frightened about, because nobody was telling me that this was normal. Not even my doctors. 3 doctors didn't tell me that this symptom was really normal. So the whole point of the perimenopause is the fact that our follicle stimulating hormone will stop sending the signals to the ovaries to produce a follicle for conception. And when that starts to happen, we might loop back on a month, and it might not produce a follicle, and therefore we won't ovulate. And that cycle becomes quite erratic. So this build up to it is where we're starting to lose these hormones, and these symptoms start to kick in. But as I say, the menopause is only 24 hours, and this is a surprise to most people.
Sarah, can I ask a question? I read somewhere, and it might be absolute rubbish, so I'm hoping you're going to clear this one up for me. Is it true that that women obviously have the caring? We're the caring natured one. Yeah. Is it true that we lose that during the menopause? And that's why, because we've had our children, they've grown up, and that's why partly why there's a lot of divorces, because we just can't be bothered with any of it any longer.
I think there is an awakening, Heather, rather than
I thought it was hormonal. Well,
actually, because our progesterone, when we, the whole point of our hormones is that we do nurture, we do have this nurturing hormone that actually, so that when we are trying to, if we are, our body thinks we should be conceiving, our body thinks that it's going to produce an egg, that we're going to fertilize it and produce a baby. So we naturally have a sort of nurturing time. And once that progesterone stops, that's that feel good hormone that, so once that starts to decline, then there could be, but I think it's more of an awakening. I think we get to a stage where we run out of, do you know what, I don't need to do this anymore. I don't actually. I think I've served my purpose. I think I've done enough for everybody else, and actually it's a bit of me time now.
It's like
so I think
you run out of fucks to give.
You've got no more fucks to give.
There are no fucks left.
Fresh out.
All gone.
Completely out.
Exactly. Like I definitely rail back against that whole like women are just natural. I think there's obviously for giving birth and all the rest and raising kids, but like we're fucking socially conditioned to do this shit. It's social conditioning. Like there isn't so much more of the hormones that like we're just better at. I'm sorry, what? Doing all of the emotional labor, all of the shit that dudes just don't want to do. So sorry, I just had to.
No, but this is what I get a lot of as well, is the fact that we've had to battle for our place in in the workplace, and we've had to battle for everything else, but we haven't relinquished anything else. We haven't relinquished those nurturing roles. We haven't relinquished the lion's share of the housework in most households. I'm not saying there's no chaps out there not pulling their weight, because
generalized,
generalize it, but it is. But in the majority, and especially of the older generation, like of my age group, that I think that is only just coming in now, where men sort of take more responsibility in the house. Please don't batter me for this, for saying this, guys. But it is. But we have really pushed to have equal rights in the workplace and have that stature and everything else. But we still need to hand over a bit of the iron every now and again.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that I was having this this sort of internal debate, and I think I spoke to Heather about using a service that helps me with the stuff I just can't get to. And I really had to step over a whole lot of what makes me entitled to help and everybody else is coping, and why do I need somebody to help with this stuff, and does it make me lazy, and all these questions. But it's the fact that I'm a single mum, I have a home, I have a massive job, and actually you can't do anything. It's that whole, actually everybody has a limit of their capability, and I can imagine when you're going through a time like menopause as well, on top of that your whole body is aching, you can't think straight, you're worried about actually delivering or not being able to deliver at work, you're not sleeping at night. I can't imagine. So I think there's got to be, if I know even able-bodied, the guilt that I'm dealing with in accepting help, I think we've got to get, is that social conditioning thing you were on about, Elisa, is that we're told 100%. We should cope with it and we should be fine. And also I had this said to me once, you're lucky that you get to go into the workplace. It's not the place for women. Women should be at home. You chose to have a kid. Don't die, Elisa. Don't shoot anyone. But this was said to me by somebody I actually really respected at work. It was like, you can stop playing at this career thing. You chose to have a kid. That's your responsibility. And it shouldn't be somebody else being at home with your child, which was my then husband, who'd give up being a builder to be at home. So I think it's that whole, there's just a vision of what we should be doing, and everything we then choose to take on in addition, we have to deal with because we chose that. But actually, it just, everything, it's supposed to be shared.
Absolutely.
Accepting help. And I suppose maybe that brings us nicely on to, what help can we offer? What help is there for these women hitting this point in their life, dealing with all the things, as well as handing over the ironing and talking to Jeff or Sheila or whoever else is in the house and saying, please, can you help me out? What can we do? What resources are available?
Well, this is why I deliver these trainings into workplaces, just so that we're actually starting the conversation. So immediately starting the conversation, breaking down that taboo, so that we can say the word menopause and people don't turn inside out at the very thought of it. So, they're going into companies that are male dominated is quite a big deal. But most of the men that are in that room are living with somebody who's going through menopause, and they're getting to the stage where they don't know what to say, they don't know how to cope. And they're treading on eggshells because they either smother them in kindness, and that really gets women's go, or they don't do enough, or it's finding it very tricky to get that balance right. So I always just say, going into workplaces and having a talk about menopause that could be a 45-minute lunch and learn. This is what we do with Heather, is that we just educate people to say these are normal symptoms. This is all very normal what we're experiencing. We're not expecting everything to evolve around us and you change everything, but we would like you to be aware that I could be suffering from these symptoms, and especially if it is a confidence thing, or a brain fog thing where you're not on top of what you would normally do. Instead of feeling as if you're failing at it, being able to say, could I just have a little bit longer to complete that work, please, because I want to check my figures, or I want to check what I've written, just to make sure it's at the same quality that it used to be. And that isn't a huge workaround, but it's really, really powerful for somebody who just needs a little bit of support.
Yeah.
So the support that you can offer in workplaces is temperature control. Don't have a woman who is going through hot sweats every 30 minutes sitting by a radiator or a window in full sunlight. Make sure that she's got ventilation. It could be a little tiny fan on her desk that could be very personal, so nobody else is suffering from the blast of cold. But actually, for her, that makes a big difference. Always have drinking water available. Have a quiet room where if somebody's going through a major anxiety or panic attack because they feel as if they're out of control, just go and sit in there for 5 minutes and then just gather your thoughts again. That's not only menopause, by the way. This could be somebody going through a life change, just that anxiety. So these are things that would suit everybody. But if we can get the word menopause in there and stop people going, oh my God, don't talk to me about that, that's about getting old, then we can break down and start talking. When I walk into a room of very, very quiet women and start talking about the menopause, it takes on average 20 minutes and then you can't shut them up, because as soon as one says, oh God, this is when she said that's happened to me, and then before you know it, you're trying to quieten the room because you've got more to get through and they just want to talk about it. But it's brilliant. It's a really good way of actually getting people to support each other through this. So that's how I deliver it into the workplace. Then there are bigger courses that we provide, which are management training or workplace champions. Champions are a great resource in any business because then they haven't got any authority over you as a person in your role. So if I was going to my boss and saying, I'm really not coping, I'm finding it difficult to sleep, I'm very tired, and my mind isn't on, my mind is just a bit distracted, I just need a bit more time. My thought would be, I can't really say that to him because he's going to think I can't do my job any longer. Because actually that happened to me once when I asked for more help. Oh, you can't do your job, I'm going to put this person in your job instead. Whereas a champion can actually just have a chat and say, well, tell me more about it. What is it? What kind of help do you need? Do you know where you can get help? Can we signpost you to the professionals? Can we actually, just explain what's going on? And then you've got a little bit more awareness about it. So, yeah. So I think the other thing that's really important to note is that we're talking very much about natural menopause here, whereas the sort of biological system slows down. We run out of eggs. We're born with around about 2 million eggs, and by the time we reach just past puberty, we've lost so many of them that actually our most fertile years are in our 20s. That's when we've still got the most eggs, and then they decline. And some women will go through menopause a lot earlier than their 50s because their eggs will run out sooner. So it's between 45 and 55 is the most is a common time. Before 45 is considered early, but before 40 is premature. And girls as young as 13 can go through menopause if they just weren't born with enough eggs. Wow. So this is another thing to think about. Women who've had surgery, if they've had any cancer treatment, or medical treatment, or they've had hysterectomy or an oophorectomy, they will go through a surgical menopause, which basically takes you from having all your hormones to 0 hormones the next day, and all these symptoms come crashing in. Now, if you are 26 years old and you are looking for your life partner, and all your friends are looking for their life partner and planning their families and everything else, and you have gone through menopause, you don't fit with the 51-year-old brigade who are complaining about night sweats and their husbands and their kids and everything else. You don't fit in there, but actually you don't fit with the normal 26-year-olds as well, who are still going out clubbing and finding somebody to have a family with.
Yeah.
So there's a very sensitive conversation to have around menopause that actually is inclusive of everybody who can go through that as well.
One of my very close friends, actually, Bobby, has had chronic and very severe endometriosis since she started her periods, and I think she's 20. Oh God. Oh yeah, she'd be 31, I think, and she's just had a full hysterectomy. And so she did say, I've got my son, which is great, but she understood. To be fair, she's been in so much pain for so many years. She's grateful for it, but she is. I doubt she knows what's coming. So I will definitely follow this episode.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm actually training in endometriosis at the moment because it keeps coming up more and more in the training that I'm doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. And again, it's so more people have endometriosis than diabetes, and everybody knows about diabetes, but we don't know about endometriosis. And it takes on average 8.5 years for a woman to be diagnosed with endometriosis, because there's the assumption that you've just got heavy periods and you just have to go on with it. Some people have more pain than others. It's like, oh my God, it's appalling, really.
There's so much to be said for, as a woman, no matter what you're going to a healthcare professional for, of being able to advocate for yourself. You hear so many stories, whether it's women in pregnancy, endometriosis, whatever it is, where you just get kind of shoved away and you're like, you'll be fine. I suppose we're coming up to that wrap time now, so I guess we'll move into that kind of like final closing thoughts and takeaways. I know what my takeaway is. It's fuck, but that's mine.
Do you know what I'd say, ladies? I'm going to just do my final thought here, and this is kind of reassuring, hopefully. You've heard of post-traumatic growth, the idea that, we had post-traumatic stress disorder. We all knew what that was. And in positive psychology, there's a concept of post-traumatic growth, which is that the things that are the most rubbish in our lives are actually not always, dependent on the level of trauma, depending on what we've experienced, the number of traumas, but actually we can grow through them. And everything that I've experienced in my life, which has been rubbish on the surface, actually, divorce and, having a child in very difficult circumstances and my parents dying and all this kind of stuff, I feel out of the back of that, I have so much more that I didn't have before. I've got more empathy and I don't give a fuck in the same breath.
Amen.
Love that.
I want that period of life to happen.
That's the best.
So you come out the other side and ultimately it's like, this is good. This is good. But you have to go through it. And that's the thing, isn't it? With all this pain, we wouldn't choose it. We wouldn't choose any of the pain that we go through. But we have to go through it. And then we come out the other side feeling better.
We do. I hate the word midlife crisis, the term midlife crisis, because I think a crisis is only a crisis if it hurts somebody else and actually it causes damage. Whereas I prefer a midlife awakening. I think there is a point when we get to, we do reach that age where we think we want more for ourselves. And I speak for many of my friends where we have made a huge transition in what we do with our careers and our lives, and we've made some good decisions that actually on the surface are quite scary and really, really life-changing. But my God, we are embracing it. And there's something that I would never have done in my 40s. I would never have taken those chances. So I think there is a great positivity about reaching this. And we, to reach this age is good. To actually get to menopause, we are lucky, because I know many good women who didn't make it this far. And I always say, we've got to take the rough with the smooth.
Yeah, amen to that. I think my takeaway, other than the fact I have rubbish Wi-Fi today, is I think it's incredible and the right thing to be starting these conversations, to be allowing people to understand what it looks like, that it's in the post. Sarah, I love that. That it's in the post, and actually as it starts to arrive piece by piece, we can recognize it, and we need to start doing more of that education for ourselves, with our peers, and also partners and things. And I think the bit that's on my mind really would be for anybody managing women in the workplace is, dial that empathy up, because it's a lot to cope with, it's a lot to do. And actually how this woman comes out the back of menopause can be massively affected by the support she gets while she's going through it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I heard on the Diary of a CEO podcast was out the back of it, actually, when your hormones regulate again and you've landed where you're going to land, actually, you're more resilient to stress. You are absolutely way more informed about your mind and your body because you've had to relearn it.
Yeah.
And we are so much stronger. And actually, and I think the lady says the best version of myself that I have ever been.
Yeah.
We just need to support each other through it. So yeah, I think I'm so glad that I had this conversation. I've learned so much, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you both on
Thank
sharing.
you for inviting us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been about, I mean, I could go on forever because there's just so much about it, about keeping women in the workplace, keeping them where they want to be. If they want to be there, let's get them there. Because if we lose that tacit knowledge of our industries, then we lose that support mechanism for everybody around as well. And the talent that we lose, but it also attracts new talent if you show that you are supportive of menopause. So there's loads to do, but it shouldn't be that difficult. So thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Lovely. Well, I think that's a wicked place to wrap. So thank you everybody for tuning into this episode of Speak. We hope it was informative. And if you have more questions, we will be posting probably on our individual LinkedIn anyway. So please respond with your questions. We're here to help and guide and give as much support as we can. So thank you very much. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.